The night was silent in Charleston, broken only by the patter of rain. Daniel Carter, a former Marine haunted by the ghosts of war, walked the empty street with Ranger, his loyal German shepherd, when something stopped him cold, a faint piano melody drifting from a darkened house. The notes were fragile, breaking, as if played by trembling hands that had forgotten how to hope. He followed the sound and saw them, two little girls in torn nightgowns, their faces pale, their eyes brimming with fear, pressing tiny fingers against the keys of a locked room. And in that instant, Daniel realized the war wasn't over. Not until he freed them, and the music of their father's love could rise again. Stay with me to see how this night changes everything. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what happens next. The rains had passed through Charleston the night before, leaving the air damp and heavy with the scent of magnolia and salt from the harbor. Out in the quiet suburbs where the oak trees draped their limbs like grieving widows over narrow lanes, a mansion stood in uneasy silence. Its white shutters were closed tight, the brass knocker untarnished but unused, and the ivy climbing its stone walls appeared more like chains than ornaments. This was the house of the late Edward Hayes composer, pianist, a man whose music had once filled concert halls across the South with shimmering hope. Now his death had left not only a silence in his home, but in the fragile lives of the two children who had once danced to the notes of his piano. Inside, the house smelled faintly of turpentine polish and extinguished candles. The grand hallway still bore portraits of Edward in various stages of his career. A young man with jet black hair bending over the keys with youthful fervor, a mature artist bowing beneath chandeliers, a gentle father cradling two golden-haired infants in his arms. But the most recent painting was unfinished. It leaned against a hallway wall, Edward's face half-sketched, his eyes uncolored, his hand frozen mid-stroke, as if death itself had interrupted his final composition. Beyond that hallway, hidden behind double oak doors, bound now with a heavy brass lock, sat the room that had been Edward's heart, his music room. The Steinway piano, its polished mahogany now dulled beneath a thin layer of dust, stood like a slumbering giant. It had been his first great purchase when he was only 21, playing in backwater bars and saving every dollar until he could claim the instrument that would carry his genius. Amelia and Clara, his twin daughters, had grown up beneath its lid, their small fingers once plinking clumsy scales as he laughed and guided them. Now the piano stood mute, imprisoned by Veronica Hayes, the widow he had married late in life. Amelia sat just outside that locked door, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She was the smaller of the twins, her face paler, her wrists thinner, her hair a tangle of wheat blonde strands falling into eyes that had once been bright, but now shimmered only with shadows. Ink still stained her fingers from the last time she had dared copy her father's notes into the small cloth-bound book she hid beneath her pillow. She pressed her ear against the door, as if she might still catch the ghost of a melody from the silent room. Clara knelt beside her, though Clara's spirit was sharper. Where Amelia trembled, Clara frowned, her lips pressed into a line that reminded anyone who looked of their father's stubbornness. At only 8, her gaze already carried defiance, yet even her courage faltered beneath Veronica's heel. Clara reached out to grasp her sister's hand, whispering, "If we listen hard enough, maybe Daddy's still playing inside." Amelia's lips quivered. "I can't hear him anymore." Clara tightened her grip but said nothing more. They sat there until the footsteps of their stepmother shattered their fragile moment. Veronica descended the staircase like an actress making her entrance, her crimson dress whispering against the marble floor. She was a woman of 35, slender with a calculated elegance, her golden hair cascading in curls carefully sculpted, her lips painted the color of wine. Yet her eyes, cold and hard, betrayed no softness. Once, when Edward had brought her into this house, he had spoken of her as a muse. Her laughter had filled parties, her beauty had turned heads. But to the twins, she was a jailer, not a guardian. "What are you doing here again?" Her voice was a blade, sharp and deliberate. The girls scrambled to their feet. Amelia hid her ink-stained hands behind her back. Clara tried to stand tall, though her knees shook. "This room is mine now," Veronica continued, tapping the locked door with one manicured nail. "Your father left it all to me." "You've no business lurking like rats," Clara's chin lifted, just slightly. It was Daddy's, she whispered. He promised we could keep learning. A cruel smile curved Veronica's mouth. Your father promised many things, little girl, but promises die with the man who makes them. She reached into her handbag, withdrew a key, and dangled it mockingly before their eyes. Then she slipped it back inside. Don't touch this door again. Next time you'll find yourselves outside it, in the rain. The twins shrank back as her heels clicked away, the sound echoing like a metronome counting down their dwindling hope. Far from the children's tears, Veronica later entered her study where heavy curtains muted the day. The room smelled of perfume and ink. A glass of burgundy wine sat untouched on her desk beside a pile of legal papers. Across from her lounged a lawyer in a gray pinstripe suit, thin spectacles perched on his nose, his hands folded with careful detachment. You're certain the manuscripts will sell? Veronica asked, her voice smooth now, honey replacing venom. The lawyer nodded. A collector from New York has expressed interest. Original compositions by Edward Hayes, particularly unpublished ones, could fetch a considerable sum. The piano itself. He glanced at the document, his tone cool. A Steinway of that age and pedigree could bring in nearly as much as the manuscripts combined. Veronica's lips curved again, but this time the smile was slow, serpentine. Then we must act quickly. The sooner those girls stop sniffing around, the sooner this house will pay me what I deserve. The lawyer hesitated. They are his daughters. If this ever comes to court, children don't win in court, Veronica interrupted. Not against me. I've already charmed the trustees. They see only a grieving widow protecting her late husband's estate. She stood, her dress shimmering under the lamplight. Edward's music belongs to the world, yes, but the profit belongs to me. Meanwhile, upstairs in the dim light of dusk, Amelia and Clara huddled on their bed. Their room was sparsely furnished, a pair of narrow wooden frames, one faded quilt each, and a single cracked window that looked out to the sprawling oak trees beyond. The laughter of neighbors' children sometimes drifted in, but it felt foreign, unreachable. Amelia clutched a small notebook to her chest, its pages smudged with notes scrawled from memory. She hummed softly, the melody faltering, breaking, as though she were afraid even the walls might betray her. Clara leaned close, whispering, "Don't stop. If you forget the songs, they'll win." So Amelia pressed on, though her voice cracked. The notes echoed faintly, a ghost of the piano's former glory. For a moment the room seemed to brighten, not with light but with memory. Edward's voice, warm and steady, teaching them, "Every song has a soul, just like you." But memory was not enough. Their bellies were empty, their father gone, their stepmother plotting. And beyond the locked door downstairs, the Steinway waited, mute and heavy, like a coffin for a dream. The house grew darker as the evening deepened. Veronica's laughter floated faintly from below, mingling with the clinking of glasses. Amelia and Clara lay awake, listening to the silence between the sounds, waiting for something, anything, to remind them that they were not alone. In that silence, the first thread of destiny began to weave, though the girls could not yet know it. They only knew the aching truth of loss, the sting of cruelty, and the faint, fragile memory of their father's music echoing in the shadows of their hearts. The morning light in Charleston crept timidly through the heavy curtains of the Hayes mansion, as if even the sun had grown wary of stepping inside. Dust hung in the air like ghostly threads, catching what little glow managed to slip past the shutters. Amelia stirred first, curled in her narrow bed, hugging the cloth-bound notebook she had clutched all night. Her eyelids fluttered as though she had been listening for a melody in her sleep. Clara, on the other hand, was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, chin propped on her fists, eyes set in fierce determination that did not match her 8 years. From below came the clatter of pans and the shrill ring of Veronica's voice shouting for the maid. Breakfast was rarely a meal of kindness in this house. The girls knew it meant thin oatmeal, burnt toast, and Veronica's cold stare across the table. The warmth of their father's kitchen where eggs sizzled in butter and laughter rang louder than the piano had been banished like a forgotten song. Veronica entered the dining room in a silk robe of emerald green that shimmered like reptile skin under the chandelier. She carried herself with the pride of a stage performer, her blonde curls coiled meticulously, her painted lips pursed. She sat at the head of the table, tapping her manicured nails against the polished wood as though conducting an invisible orchestra. When the twins padded in, barefoot and hesitant, she pointed at the bowls waiting for them. "Eat quickly," she commanded. "I have guests arriving, and I don't want you cluttering the house." Clara raised her eyes, dark with resistance. But Amelia stared at her oatmeal, silently stirring, as though searching for hidden treasure. Veronica watched them both, her expression a mask of disdain. "And another thing," she said, her voice crisp, "the music room is off limits. You will not loiter near it again. Do you hear me?" The girls nodded in unison. Amelia's eyes shimmered with tears, while Clara's jaw tightened. Veronica leaned back with satisfaction. To her, their silence was obedience. To the girls, it was the only shield they had left. Later that afternoon, when Veronica left for her errands in town, Amelia and Clara tiptoed upstairs. They carried their secret, an old pencil, worn down to its stub, and the notebook Amelia guarded like her own heart. Slipping into the small storage closet at the end of the hall, they crouched among forgotten trunks and moth-eaten coats. There, in the half-darkness, Amelia began to draw lines on the page, shaky but determined. Clara hummed the melody their father had taught them, the summer waltz he had played on warm evenings, when cicadas hummed outside and he let them stay up past bedtime. Amelia's hand trembled, the pencil scratching faintly on the paper, catching each note as it drifted from Clara's lips. They whispered as though afraid the walls themselves might betray them. "If we write them all down," Clara murmured, "no one can take them away." Amelia nodded. "Then Daddy's songs will live." For a moment, hope lit their faces, though it was the fragile glow of candlelight in a storm. Meanwhile, Veronica's carriage ride into town carried her to a genteel cafe, the kind adorned with lace curtains and polished brass handles. She arrived not to drink tea, but to meet once again with her lawyer, Mr. Lawrence Fitch. Fitch was a man in his late 40s, tall but slightly stooped, with silver hair slicked neatly back. His round spectacles gleamed under the cafe's chandelier. He had made his fortune defending wealthy clients and exploiting loopholes, a man more interested in numbers than people. His voice was soft, polite, but each word carried the weight of calculation. "You've considered my proposal?" Veronica asked, her eyes narrowing. Fitch sipped his tea with deliberate slowness. "The manuscripts can be valued at a higher price if we claim they were Edward's final works. Collectors will bid furiously. As for the piano, there's a gentleman from Savannah who would pay handsomely. But," he adjusted his spectacles, "we must keep the matter discreet. The town is sentimental about Mr. Hayes. If they suspect you of selling the soul of his house, they might resist." Veronica waved a hand, dismissing the thought. "They whisper, but none of them dare interfere. They only gossip behind lace curtains. I will have my fortune before the year is out." Her smile was as sharp as the edge of a knife. Back at the mansion, whispers truly had begun. At the corner grocery where barrels of apples lined the entrance, townsfolk muttered between themselves. Mrs. O'Connell, a stout widow with kind eyes, shook her head as she tucked bread into her basket. "They say she's planning to sell the Hayes house, even the piano. Shameful after all Edward did for this community." Beside her, Mr. Whitaker the barber sighed. "He played free concerts in the square, raised money for the orphanage. My boy still remembers sitting on his shoulders when the music played. And now, that woman struts about like a queen." "But will you speak against her?" another customer asked, glancing nervously toward the street. Whitaker lowered his voice. "Speak against Veronica Hayes? She has lawyers, friends in high places, and me? I have a shop to keep. Best not to meddle." The conversation faded into silence, each returning to their errands, the weight of cowardice heavy on their shoulders. Evening came again. Veronica returned from town with perfume clinging to her silk dress and satisfaction etched into her features. She ignored the girls as she swept past them, humming a tune that was not her own. The twins watched her ascend the stairs, the air around her thick with perfume and secrets. That night, as rain tapped against the window panes, Amelia and Clara crept from their room once more. The house was quiet except for Veronica's distant laughter on the telephone. In the hallway, they pressed their small ears against the locked music room door. The silence behind it was deafening. Amelia whispered, "I almost hear him." Clara shook her head. "No, that's only your heart." Yet when Amelia lifted her notebook and began sketching the faint outlines of treble clefs, Clara leaned close and hummed again. The notes were thin, fragile threads weaving into the darkness, but they were enough. For as long as the girls remembered, the music could not truly be sealed. Still, in the cold belly of the house, the Steinway waited, its lid closed, its strings silent. It bore witness to a war of silence and greed, a war two children fought with pencils and whispers, and which the world outside chose not to see. The rain came hard over Charleston that night, hammering roofs and rattling shutters as if the heavens themselves were drumming a dirge. On a quiet street beneath swaying oaks, the Hayes mansion loomed against lightning flashes, an austere silhouette with shuttered eyes and a heart locked in silence. But inside, in a single hidden corner, a fragile defiance stirred. Amelia knelt on the rug in their dimly lit bedroom, her small hands trembling as she pulled a brass key from beneath the lining of her father's old violin case. It was dull with age, its teeth worn, but she knew it by heart. Edward Hayes's spare key to the music room. Her father had once shown it to her, laughing, when she was only 6. Every musician needs a secret way back to the notes when the world tries to silence them. Clara hovered near the door, listening for the creak of Veronica's footsteps below. "Are you sure?" she whispered, eyes sharp with both fear and excitement. Amelia nodded, clutching the key tight. "Daddy left it for us. He wanted us to play." They slipped barefoot down the hallway, past shadows that bent and stretched across the walls. At the music room door, the brass lock glimmered faintly in the stormlight. With a deep breath, Amelia slid the key in. It resisted at first, stiff from neglect, then clicked open with a sound that made their hearts pound. The door gave way. The music room smelled of dust and polish, but beneath it lingered the faint perfume of oil and varnish that had always clung to Edward's work. The Steinway Grand sat at the center like a slumbering beast, its lid closed, its keys hidden. Draped curtains swayed in the draft from a cracked window. Clara darted inside first, her eyes widening. She reached out and stroked the polished wood, leaving streaks where her fingers cleared away dust. Amelia followed, her breath catching as she touched the keys. The ivory was cool, the edges worn smooth by their father's hands. "Play," Clara urged, her voice trembling with both command and longing. Amelia lowered herself onto the bench. She pressed a single key. The note rang faintly, quivering in the still air, like the cry of a bird long caged. Her fingers stumbled into the summer waltz, the melody halting and broken, but real. Clara hummed along, softly, eyes closed. For a brief moment, it was as if Edward had returned, his spirit flickering in the fragile sound. The sisters clung to the music, knowing every note could betray them, but needing it more than air. Outside, under the torrent of rain, a man paused. Daniel Carter, a former Marine, trudged through the storm with his German Shepherd, Ranger, at his side. The rain plastered his short brown hair to his forehead and darkened the olive green coat he wore. But he walked with steady rhythm, boots striking pavement like drums. His face was stern, scar faintly visible across his temple, his gray eyes always scanning. Ranger halted abruptly, ears pricked, body tense. He whined low in his throat. Daniel followed his gaze. The mansion loomed ahead, and through the storm he thought he heard something impossible. Notes of a piano, faint and faltering. He froze. The sound lanced through him, bypassing armor forged in battle. It struck memory. His mother, auburn-haired, bent over an upright piano in their modest Charleston home, her hands coaxing Chopin into night air. She had died young, but her music had been his lullaby. Now through rain and darkness, Daniel heard echoes of her, played not with mastery, but with desperate, trembling hands. He moved closer to the gates. Ranger tugged forward, tail stiff, eyes alert. Lightning revealed the outline of the house, its shutters drawn. Yet the sound leaked through a child's fragile attempt at a waltz. Notes stumbled, paused, began again. Daniel gripped the iron bars, peering in. For the briefest moment, as curtains shifted in the draft, he saw them. 2 small figures at the piano, One played, shoulders shaking with every note. The other stood close, hand resting protectively on the bench. Their pale faces, their golden hair tangled, flashed like ghosts before the curtain fell again. His chest tightened. He whispered to Ranger, "Kids." Inside, the girls felt the walls vibrate faintly as thunder cracked overhead. Amelia's fingers slipped, producing a discordant clang. She flinched, her breath quickening. Clara laid a hand on her shoulder. "Keep going. Daddy said music doesn't stop for storms." But before Amelia could continue, the crunch of tires echoed outside. Through the curtain, headlights swept the driveway. Panic seized them. Clara snapped the lid down over the keys. Amelia shoved the bench back. The two clutched the spare key, darted out, and pulled the door shut just as footsteps sounded below. Veronica's laughter floated upward, mingling with the deeper murmur of Lawrence Fitch, the lawyer. Their voices were careless, unaware of the forbidden music that had just lived again in the house. The twins hurried back to their room, clutching each other, the echo of their father's melody still trembling in their bones. Daniel stood in the rain, watching the car vanish behind the gates. He knew the woman in the passenger seat, Veronica Hayes, painted lips glowing under dashboard light. He had seen her in town, her elegance cold, her smile empty. But upstairs he had seen something else. Two children clinging to music like castaways clinging to driftwood. He could have walked away. His soldier's instinct told him it wasn't his fight. But the sound of those trembling notes haunted him, pulling threads of memory and duty tight around his heart. He looked down at Ranger, who gazed back with unspoken understanding. "We'll come back, boy," Daniel said quietly. Rain coursed down his face, indistinguishable from the tears he would never admit to. "They need us." And with that, he turned into the storm, carrying with him the fragile melody of a silenced house. The next evening, Charleston breathed in heavy silence beneath a low sky. Clouds pressed close, swallowing the moon. The Hayes mansion loomed at the end of the rain-slick street, shutters drawn like eyes refusing to see. Inside, Amelia and Clara clutched the brass key, their last secret from their father. The house was quiet. Veronica had gone out with Lawrence Fitch, her lawyer, their laughter echoing faintly as the car pulled away. "We have time," Clara whispered, bold as ever. Amelia hesitated, then nodded. Together they crept into the hallway, the key trembling in Amelia's hand. At the music room, the lock turned with a reluctant click. The door swung open. The Steinway waited in dust and silence. Clara sat first, Amelia by her side. Fingers met keys, halting, timid. The summer waltz rose, broken and stumbling, but alive. For a moment, their father's presence filled the air. Across town, Daniel Carter sat awake as always, Ranger at his feet. Insomnia gnawed at him, but tonight it was the phantom of music that drove him restless. When Ranger suddenly rose, ears pricked, Daniel knew. He followed his dog out into the night. The quiet lane led him again to the Hayes mansion. Through the open window, notes trickled out, fragile, desperate. Daniel's jaw clenched. They're still fighting for him. He scaled the gate. Ranger landed beside him, silent shadow. Inside, the mansion's silence shattered with headlights sweeping into the drive. The sisters froze. Tires crunched on wet gravel. Doors slammed. "She's back," Amelia gasped. The music stopped. Too late. Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Veronica's figure burst into the room, silk robes snapping around her. "Thieves!" she spat, eyes blazing. She seized Clara by the arm, shoved Amelia against the wall. "Didn't I warn you?" "This piano isn't yours." At that instant, Daniel stormed in from the side hall, rain dripping from his coat, Ranger at his heel, his voice cut like steel. "Let them go!" For a heartbeat, the room froze. Veronica's eyes widened, then narrowed with fury. "You!" she hissed. "Breaking into my house?" "You'll regret this," Ranger growled low, a rumble from the depths of his chest. Veronica faltered but held Clara tighter. Amelia whimpered. Daniel stepped forward, scarred face taut with rage. "Children don't beg to play piano unless someone silenced them. You've done enough damage." The dog barked, sharp and commanding. Veronica released Clara involuntarily, stumbling back. Both girls clung to Daniel as he wrapped his arms around them. "You're safe," he murmured. He moved quickly, guiding them out of the room, down the staircase. Rain drummed on the windows as the front door creaked open. But there, blocking the way, stood Veronica and Lawrence Fitch, having re-entered from the drive. Veronica's crimson lips curled with triumph, Fitch looming at her side in his tailored suit. "Well, well," Veronica sneered. "Caught red-handed. Trespassing." Kidnapping, her voice was honey laced with venom. "The police will love this." Fitch adjusted his tie, his cold eyes glinting. "You've overplayed your hand, Marine." Step away from the girls, Daniel stood his ground, the twins clutching his coat. His voice thundered low, steady. "No, I won't step away. Not until the world knows what you've done." Ranger stepped forward, hackles raised, a growl reverberating like thunder. Veronica instinctively recoiled, dragging Fitch half a step back. The lawyer tried to mask it with bravado, but his hand trembled against his briefcase. Daniel's gaze bore into them. "Go on, call the police. I'll be here with bruises, with frightened children, with witnesses." Across the street, a curtain stirred. Mr. Harlan, the retired postman, had his phone raised, its screen glowing. Through the rain-blurred glass, he filmed steadily. The tremor in his hands was matched only by the certainty in his eyes. This time, the truth won't stay hidden. Veronica saw him, her face twisted, fury breaking through her mask. "You stop recording!" she shrieked, but the rain drowned her voice. Daniel's voice cut over hers. "Your reign of fear ends tonight." Lightning split the sky. For a moment, the scene froze in stark relief. The soldier with two trembling girls in his arms, the dog guarding like a shadow of justice, and the woman and her lawyer retreating under the weight of eyes finally watching. The front door slammed behind them. Daniel lifted Amelia and Clara closer. Their tears wet his coat, but for the first time, their sobs carried something new hope. The storm of that night did not fade with the sunrise. It lingered in whispers across Charleston streets. By morning, the clip Mr. Harlan had filmed was already moving from phone to phone, each share carrying with it the tremor of outrage. Neighbors who had once looked away now leaned forward, their murmurs swelling like a gathering tide. On Broad Street, a small crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Headlines blazed across the local paper. Stepmother accused of abuse. Attempted theft of Hayes' legacy. Veronica Hayes' face, once polished and untouchable, now stared back from the newsprint eyes cold, mouth twisted mid-shout, captured in Harlan's shaky but damning footage. Inside the courthouse, Daniel Carter sat stiff-backed on the bench. Amelia and Clara pressed close to his sides. The girls wore simple cotton dresses lent by a neighbor, their blonde hair brushed as neatly as possible, but their eyes were wary, clinging to him like anchors in a storm. Ranger lay at Daniel's feet, head resting on his paws, gaze fixed on the door. The dog's steady presence calmed the sisters more than words ever could. Each time the bailiff's voice echoed down the hall, Ranger lifted his head, ears twitching, a silent guardian in uniform of fur. Veronica entered at last, crimson lips painted, silk suit gleaming, but her posture betrayed her. Her steps were too sharp, her smile too brittle. Lawrence Fitch followed, briefcase clutched, his tie slightly askew as if the weight of public opinion already tugged him down. Judge Marianne Holloway, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pinned tight and eyes sharp as glass, presided. Known for her uncompromising sense of justice, she wasted no time. "We are here to consider the custody of Amelia and Clara Hayes and the allegations of abuse brought against their guardian." The courtroom air stilled. Witnesses came forward. First was Mr. Harlan, his voice tremulous but firm as he described the night. He handed over his phone, the video projected onto a screen. Veronica yanking Clara's arm, Daniel shielding the girls. Ranger snarling as Fitch retreated. The sound of the children's cries filled the chamber, echoing over marble walls. Gasps rippled through the benches. Veronica shifted in her seat, color draining from her face. Fitch whispered furiously in her ear, but her lips pressed thin with fury she couldn't hide. Then came another voice. Mrs. Ellison, an elderly neighbor, who spoke of hearing shouting, of seeing the girls with bruises, of how she had turned away in fear of Veronica's sharp tongue. Tears lined her wrinkled cheeks as she said, I should have spoken sooner. God forgive me, Daniel himself took the stand. His posture was rigid, but his voice carried steady authority born of combat. He spoke not of war, but of what he had seen. Two children, robbed of their father, silenced in their own home. Music was their only refuge. She tried to take even that. The girls clutched each other, watching him, their blue eyes wide. When Judge Holloway finally turned to them, her voice softened. Amelia, Clara, would you like to tell us where you want to live? A silence hung, heavy and fragile. Then Amelia whispered, with him. Her hand slipped into Daniel's. Clara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. He listens. He lets us play. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Veronica slammed her hand against the table, silk sleeve whipping, but Fitch pulled her back. Judge Holloway's gavel struck. Enough! Pending full investigation, custody of Amelia and Clara Hayes is hereby granted to Daniel Carter. The decision fell like a hammer of mercy. The girls wept openly, burying their faces in Daniel's chest. Ranger licked their hands, tail thumping against the floor. Daniel exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd held. For the first time in years, he felt the weight on his shoulders ease. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, others sang softly. It wasn't just victory over cruelty. It was the resurrection of a legacy long buried. Weeks later, the old Steinway returned to life. Restores had been called, its cracked keys replaced, its wood polished until it gleamed. In the town hall, light spilled across rows of chairs filled with neighbors, musicians, and children. At the front stood the piano, waiting. Amelia and Clara walked hand in hand to the bench. Their dresses were white this time, simple but radiant under the warm lights. Daniel stood behind them, Ranger at his side. His scarred face softened as he watched the sisters sit tall, tiny hands poised over ivory. The hall fell silent. The first note rang, then another. Together, Amelia and Clara wove the unfinished waltz, the melody their father had left incomplete. The crowd leaned forward, listening to the music that had once been silenced, now reborn in trembling, determined hands. Somewhere between the notes, laughter seemed to return, the echo of Edward Hayes guiding them still. When the final chord faded, the hall erupted. Applause thundered, tears gleamed in strangers' eyes. And then quietly, the community began to hum. A voice rose, then another, until the whole hall sang softly along, wordless but unified, carried on the current of music. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He looked down at Ranger, who wagged his tail, as if even the dog understood the moment. From that day forward, Daniel turned his rented room into more than a shelter. With the help of neighbors, he opened a small classroom lined with borrowed instruments, violins, guitars, secondhand keyboards. He named it the Hayes Music Room in honor of Edward. Children came, some barefoot, some shy, some carrying burdens too heavy for their age. Daniel guided them with patience forged in battle. He wasn't a musician like Edward, but he had Amelia and Clara, who played for the newcomers, teaching them simple songs. Ranger lay near the door each afternoon, tail thumping when a child laughed. On the wall of the classroom hung a phrase painted in Amelia's careful hand. Music never dies as long as someone listens. The words became a pledge, echoed by the voices of every child who touched the keys. That evening, as twilight painted Charleston gold, Daniel sat outside with Ranger at his feet. He watched Amelia and Clara chase laughter across the yard with other children. For the first time, their giggles rang free, not trembling, but full. Daniel leaned back, scar catching the last light of the sun, his eyes soft. For a soldier who had once believed he'd lost his place in the world, he had found it here in music, in two little girls, in a family forged by choice rather than blood. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or fire. They come quietly in the form of music reborn, in the arms of a soldier who refused to walk away, in the laughter of children who once wept in silence. Perhaps this is how God still works in our world, through the hearts willing to listen and the hands brave enough to protect. Do you believe that when love is strong enough, even the darkest silence can be turned into a song again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear them. If this story touched you, please like this video, follow our page, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey of hope and healing.